Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, December 15th, 2015. Today, I am talking about something I am very passionate about. I'm mixing a bunch of my interests homesteading, history, American history, writing, and specifically young adult fiction, which was my specialty for when I got my master's. So today, and even prepping, I am talking about Little House on the Prairie, Laura Ingalls Wilder. I am such a huge fan of this series, and ironically, I grew up with the TV show like most people. My sister had the books, and like most boys growing up in the 80s, I just assumed that they were girly books. So when I finally dug into the books in my 30s, I would say, I was just shocked and blown away that there is so much information there. She wrote 9 books in all. Just some quick stats on Laura Ingalls. Born February 7th, 1867. She passed away on February 10th, 1957, at her home in Missouri. She traveled all across the Midwest. She actually lived in Florida at one point. I'm reading off some of the places she lived: Wisconsin, Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, Florida, Missouri. Um, so she was part of our American history during a very exciting time, one of the most exciting times, I think, in our country's history, because you had the Homestead Act of 1862, which allowed people to basically make their own way, which for many men, that is, and women, and ex-slaves, it was just this opportunity to realize the American dream. You could go out with nothing but the clothes on your back, and you could make a living. If you could make the land work for you, you could become a farmer and own hundreds of acres of land. This period of time, the wild, I guess a lot of people would refer to it as the Wild West, really was a short period in our history. It really was from the end of the Civil War to about 1895, 1900. So a really short period of time. So think about all those hundreds of westerns that have been made. It was all during that sliver of time in our American history. So it was a time of freedom, and just the opportunity was there for people. I mean, the American dream is still alive. I do believe it is harder as each day goes by, with more laws and more restrictions. But getting back to Laura Ingalls, one of my favorite authors, so endeared to me and my wife that our second child, her middle name is Rose, after Laura Ingalls' daughter, Rose. So Avery Rose Theo is my second daughter. So my favorite book out of the 9 books is actually the first one, the prequel. It's called Little House in the Big Woods. It's actually my favorite, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I actually had a nicer, older version that I gave away to my buddy who's a farmer, and he fell in love with the book as well. So I got this at like a secondhand store. For anyone like me who grew up thinking these were books for girls and talked about dresses and things that wouldn't interest young boys, you're sadly mistaken. I mean, this book is just chock, especially Little House in the Big Woods, is just chock full of information for people that are interested in prepping and homesteading and the country and our history and just things little boys grew up interested in. Let me start off first. So I'm going to jump back and forth through a couple different reasons why I love this. Some of it will be historical, some of it's the way she wrote. I think she was a very good writer. Back then there was no TV. These people were just grammar nerds, and just if you read letters from that period, just so eloquent. She was a very good writer. She does a great job setting up exposition with setting the scene. So I'm going to read just a paragraph or two from the first page. Little House in the Big Woods. Once upon a time, 60 years ago, a little girl lived in the big woods of Wisconsin in a little gray house made of logs. The great dark trees of the big woods stood all around the house, and beyond them were other trees, and beyond them were more trees. As far as a man could go to the north, in a day or a week or a whole month, there was nothing but woods. There were no houses, there were no roads, there were no people. There were only trees and the wild animals who had their homes among them. Wolves lived in the big woods, and bears, and huge wild cats. Muskrats and mink and otter lived by the streams. Foxes had dens in the hills and deer roamed everywhere. She goes on to just describe what it's like um, in that setting, in that homestead setting. And there's a couple other things that just jump out at me. I mean, she goes really, again, for anyone who thinks this is just for girls, this is the antithesis of that. If anything, I almost think this book is all for little boys. I mean, he spent like 2 pages talking about how he skinned the deer, and then how he cut the meat into strips, and then how he put it up into a hollow tree on a board with nails and smoked the meat for like 2 days or something. And that's how they made the beef jerky, I guess. You would have the preserved meat for the winter. How they harvested food, but they would have to garden, and their gardens were kind of around stumps of the trees in the big woods that have been cut down. Another excerpt from the when the kids are playing. Oh, here's a description on how the mother took the head of a pig and made head cheese out of it. So they like saved every little square ounce of meat from these animals that they hunted or raised as livestock. So here's another excerpt. The attic was a lovely place to play. The large, round, colored pumpkins made beautiful chairs and tables. The red peppers and the onions dangled overhead. The hams and the venison hung in their paper wrappings, and all the bunches of dried herbs and spicy herbs for cooking and the bitter herbs for medicine gave the place a dusty, spicy smell. Often the wind howled outside with a cold and lonesome sound, but in the attic, Laura and Mary played house with the squashes and the pumpkins, and everything was snug and cozy. It's just such a great job of her settings. Let's see here. They talk about, again, how the father has to go out and shoot. He shoots a bear, and the bear had just killed a pig, so he gets a pig and a bear, and how they fight over the different parts of the bear for food. I mean, the kids do, jokingly. So now there's a whole chapter, which I thought was totally cool, on how the father cleaned his black powder rifle. How he has to like pour hot water down it, and then he has to grease it with the ramrod, and how his protocol for always leaving the gun armed and above the door on some pegs that he whittled out of wood, and how it was important to always have a loaded gun with you, especially out in the woods. You only have one shot, and you have to make the first shot count, because if you wound the bear could come after you and kill you while you're trying to reload your gun. I mean, there's some real frontier action in this. At one point, the mother goes out to, I don't want to give away the whole book, but I'm just giving some different action scenes. The mother goes out to feed the cow, Suki, and it's dark out, and she's like, get back in the barn. She smacks the cow on the butt, and she turns around, and it's a bear out there trying to get at the cow. And so she has to like run back in the house. Another great little excerpt of description. Laura listened to the wind in the big woods. All around the house, the wind went crying as though it were lost in the dark and the cold. The wind sounded frightened. It's just a great description. She's such a good writer. What else do I see here? And then they also have other things too for little girls. They talk about how the mother made dresses out of calico material she bought. Sorry. So let's see here, and the harvesting, and that how family members come together for the harvesting, and how at the very end there's like a new wonderful machine that helps them harvest, but it's like 6 horses have to draw this machine that harvests all the wheat. It's just, and then it ends again going back towards winter, and how it's just snug and cozy in the house, and Dad, their pa's there, and how it's like the best time of year because he'll take down his fiddle. He has time to spend with the girls, even though they're in this tiny little cabin. She just paints this picture of like this era of they have nothing and they're just so happy, and it's the antithesis of what our culture pushes today. And it's just such a sweet little book. And again, it's for little boys, little girls, adults, and it has a little bit of history and homesteading and prepping, and it's just a well-written book. So I'm probably going to do. I may do another podcast at some point just on Laura Ingalls Wilder, the person, just to kind of follow up my fascination with her and her writing. So that's it for today. Please, if you like this, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, pass it around, and thank you for your time. Have a great day.